The Heat continued their winning ways, this time versus the New York Knicks, making adjustments throughout the game and finding their way to a victory without having to rely on a monster game from Jimmy Butler. But while there's plenty of reason for optimism, could an injury to Butler be a factor throughout the series? We'll break down how Miami's role players made a huge difference and the latest on Jimmy on today's playoff edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The Heat go into Madison Square Garden and they win Game 1, stealing home court advantage the same way that they did against the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round. Everything would be great for the Miami Heat right now if Jimmy Butler had not turned his ankle in the fourth quarter. He stayed in the game, but he could barely move. The Heat still got the win thanks to big games from Gabe Vincent, Kyle Lowry, some timely plays from Bam Adebayo and Kevin Love. We'll talk about Jimmy Butler later on and everything that we know about his injury in a second. But the Heat lead the series now 1-0. David, what stood out to you about the Heat's win?
Well, the first thing I think is the utter resiliency of this team. I think a lot of people had been looking at Madison Square Garden as a factor, and that how soon would Miami be able to count on Jimmy Butler after the incredible series that he had against Milwaukee. But more importantly, Miami showed, I think, not just the toughness and resiliency of this team, but the incredible coaching of Eric Spoelstra to recognize what was happening in that first half and make the necessary adjustments throughout the game, implementing a strategy that worked, particularly when it came to limiting Jalen Brunson, who was really, really effective, punishing Miami in the mid-range game, just driving to his spots. You made the comparison to Jimmy Butler, and it's an apt one because when Brunson has it rolling, he just finds a way, despite his small size, to be able to create space, get that shot going, and he certainly had it in the first half. He was killing Miami in the mid-range game. In the second half, they made such a concerted effort, the Heat defense did, to just challenge Brunson on every possession. When he had the ball in his hands, he would get picked up immediately, draw a double team, force him to either try to take a tough shot or make a bad pass out to the perimeter where New York's willing shooters were there. They just weren't capable of hitting shots either. They shot just 20% from three-point range. They were abysmal from beyond the arc, and I think it was a necessary step that Miami needed to make. Again, making these kind of adjustments throughout the game, that's something that won't get talked about, but it was a completely different first and second half, and I think a lot of that falls on both the Heat players and Miami's coaching staff.
I would even say they had the right game plan going into the game. I think they really did understand the assignment. They had scouted the Knicks well. They have played each other 4 times this year, and more importantly, 3 times after the Josh that's what I'm saying. 3 times after the Josh Hart deal, with basically transformed the Knicks bench. And so they were 3-1 during the season, but the point differential after those 4 games was like Knicks +6 or Knicks +7.
Right.
It was so close. It was a Julius Randle miracle 3-pointer from being a tied series, and maybe Tyler Herro making an open 3 to win the game in Madison Square Garden in February from being Heat 3-1. I mean, that's how close that this series was. And going into this series, I think both of these teams are really close. You and I had a really hard time picking this series, right? I ended up sort of saying it was going to be a 7-game series and kind of hedging my bets. You went Heat in 6. You go to the national analysts. Everybody's like 6 games, 7 games, but they kind of are hemming and hawing over who's going to win, even though it does seem that most analysts are picking the Knicks. That's neither here nor there. Everybody's expecting a tight series. And I thought the Heat had the right – like I said, they understood the assignment going into this thing. They knew exactly what was going to happen. The Knicks were going to put Josh Hart and Quentin Grimes on Jimmy Butler. So what did they do from the opening tip? Staggered screens, double screens, all these things. So these wide screen sets to make the Knicks defenders run over and through and in and out of these screens just to get Jimmy Butler a little bit more space. They knew that was going to be the case right away. They tried to force transition opportunities early on, knowing that the Knicks don't turn the ball over a whole lot. The Heat don't turn the ball over either. So they were careful in order to not end up on the other side the wrong way of a turnover margin, but also let's create our own semi-transition and transition opportunities by creating that with outlet passes and other things like that, and trying to push the pace and up the tempo in that way. So I thought they had like these keys that they tried to execute, and then on offense, and then defensively, they gave up a ton of points in the paint, but that's not because they were ignoring the paint, right? Like you heard after that first timeout that ABC on the broadcast, Eric Spoelstra being like, we know they want to get into the paint. Stop, get that dribble, stop them at the dribble penetration, at the point of attack. And so they knew exactly what it is that they had to do. Kind of took them a while to settle into it because this is a very different series than that Milwaukee Bucks series. Kind of feels like it took them a little while. But then once they settled in, the Knicks had a couple of punches in them. They didn't roll over by any stretch, but it kind of felt like cruise might be a strong word, but I never really felt like this game was in doubt in the fourth quarter, I would say.
The word that I kept coming up with is either timing or cadence. It just felt like after the really tough physical 5-game series against Milwaukee and having to adjust to, again, the timing of how players attack the basket, whether it's Giannis or Chris Middleton or Brook Lopez or something else, while they may have had that plan and strategy, as you pointed out, I think they weren't quite ready for how Brunson times his drives to the baskets. And then once they went through that first half, they started to see kind of signs of life late in the second quarter, and that carried through into the third quarter where they absolutely took control. And it's a good point you make, because once they found out that timing, they looked much more comfortable. They didn't look challenged. Like even when the Knicks cut the lead down to 3 after it had been 10 at one point, Miami just said, okay, well, we figured it out. We know how to adjust, not just defensively on Brunson, but also kind of just boxing out Mitchell Robinson, understanding when guys like quickly wanted to put the ball down or try and shoot. Josh Hart and his reckless bulldozing towards the rim. I mean, they just kind of just understood, okay, this is how they're going to attack the basket. We've got to make the adjustment. Showed a lot of patience, a lot of poise, really fantastic win for a team that has been so inconsistent all season, and yet they kind of seem to be finding their veteran poise at the right time. This is what it's all for. Kyle Lowry, and who we'll talk about later on in the show, perfectly symbolic of all that. There was so much early reporting throughout the season. Oh, Lowry's played his last game. He'll never suit up for the Heat again. And at the time, I remember saying, well, what if this is by choice, by design? They're sitting him out, hoping for him to get rest so that he can have these big moments later on in the postseason. We saw it against the Bucks. We certainly saw it today against the New York Knicks.
And at the risk of overanalyzing this win, and I do think that there are some things that we could take away from this, but if you look at like maybe the main reason why the Heat won this game, the 3-point shooting discrepancy. They went 13 of 39 from 3-point range to 33%, and the Knicks went 7 of 34 from 3-point range. So they outscored the Knicks by 18 points from beyond the arc. Now, it's not simple enough as to say, well, they just shot threes better. Like I thought they actually got to really good looks and they worked their way through the offense. They did a really good job of kind of turning away good shots and going and get great shots. Hey, let's make sure our shooters, Lowry, Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, like make sure that they're taking these threes, right?
The extra pass.
A lot of that kind of stuff, pump fake, extra pass, knowing how aggressive that Knicks defense is going to be.
Right.
So they credit to them. The Knicks also missed a whole lot of open shots, and the Heat need to probably tighten that up going into game 2. So that is an important reason why they won, but kind of relating to what you just said, a team that's been inconsistent shooting so long for so much of this season, playing their best basketball right now through round 1 against the Milwaukee Bucks, and they obviously carried over whatever momentum they had. Look, they didn't shoot 45% from 3-point range. They shot 33% from 3-point range. That was still better than the Knicks, but we're starting to come down to earth a little bit from 3-point range, but the Heat finding other ways to go ahead and win this game. We do have credit cookies later on, but the big story, Jimmy Butler, his ankle. We have the latest update on that. What is Jimmy Butler saying about that, and what does it look like for the Heat going forward? Maybe they have a good reason to rest him, regardless of how that ankle turns out. We'll talk about that next. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day of the NBA playoffs finals, one PrizePicks user will win a chance at becoming a millionaire. One entry placed after 8 a.m. Eastern will be randomly selected each day, and whoever placed that entry will be given a 6-pick flex with the following payouts. You can get all 6 correct picks, you get $1 million. You get 5 correct picks, you get 80,000. 4 correct picks, 16 grand. Still a lot of money. Always a good opportunity. You must opt in at the link to be eligible for the $1 million entry. Once you opt in, all you have to do is play the game like normal, and you could be the lucky winner. And playing the game has never been so easy, because daily fantasy has just been made so easy by PrizePicks. You just pick the players you want against the projected numbers. You don't have to go and compete against anybody else. You versus the numbers, which makes it so much easier. Easy payouts, fast payouts, everything you could want. and you get a chance to place a wager on almost virtually any sport that you can imagine. You'll find it at PrizePicks. So download the PrizePicks app, go to PrizePicks.com, and sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit 100, PrizePicks gives you 100. If you deposit 50, PrizePicks will give you 50. So don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100 by downloading the PrizePicks app or going to PrizePicks.com today.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every dayers, we're going to be back Monday with a look at Game 2 and an update on Jimmy Butler's ankle, but that's what we're talking about right now. 5 minutes left in the game, the fourth quarter. Heat basically rolling. Jimmy Butler going to the basket on a drive. Josh Hart trying to fight over a screen. It gets physical as it had been the entire game. He kind of lands hard into Jimmy Butler, trying to fight over a screen. Falls awkwardly into Jimmy Butler's right ankle, and then it kind of gets trapped under Josh Hart's foot, and then he goes down hard. He is writhing in pain. Yep. And you see the camera pan immediately to Erik Spoelstra, who utters a curse word very visibly. And I think that's how all of Heat fans felt in that moment. Jimmy Butler obviously having one of the great playoff performances we've ever seen. He played great in this game up until then, but he stays in the game because he did get fouled on the play. In order to stay in the game, he had to take those free throws because if he goes to the locker room or goes to the bench without taking those free throws, he's ruled ineligible for the rest of the game. So he has to take those free throws. He does. I think a lot of people were wondering whether or not the Heat would call a timeout and sub him out. Nope. He kind of just tightened the shoelaces on that right ankle, on that sneaker, and stayed in the game. Now, that's about all he did was stay in the game because he would just kind of limp over to a corner and stand there with his arms open, ready to, with his hands out, ready to shoot, kind of practicing his shot, his shooting form in the middle of live action. I've got a few bones to pick with how the Knicks handled this. It was a little strange, and it kind of felt like they wasted that opportunity. But in terms of Jimmy Butler staying in that game, what did you think about that, David? And what did you think about just the way he was in those minutes, in those last 4 minutes where he was in there?
A bit of a fluke how the injury happened. And it's tough to see. He obviously was in a lot of pain, and you could tell that as he's like rolled over onto his stomach, and he sees Spoelstra's reaction, and everybody kind of standing over Jimmy and calling for the medical staff, and he goes back out there.
That was the playoff run right there, laying on the floor. That's what everybody's thinking.
And with good reason after what Jimmy had done against the Bucks and was able to do against the Knicks in Game 1 too. So shows toughness of Jimmy's part. I imagine he probably told Spo, no, there's no way I'm staying out of this game. So there was no point in him coming out. But
there was a moment where I think it was a few possessions after that. And I agree. Spo was like, you want to stay in? And Jimmy was like, yep, let me stay in. And Jimmy is just like, again, just limping down the floor, keeping as much weight off of that right leg as possible. Yep. He's not going up for rebounds. He's barely even playing defense. He's just there. And it was so bad at one point that you can kind of see Erik Spoelstra turn to Chris Quinn and just be like, should we take him out? And Chris Quinn just being like, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. He's like, I have no idea.
Why are you asking me, dude? I'm not Jimmy Butler.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it was so funny.
Yep. I don't know. Like,
do you think the Knicks wasted an opportunity by not attacking Jimmy? Yeah.
Two things. Well, first of all, why did you keep your best wing defender on him if he was just standing in the corner? You could have easily just hit Emmanuel quickly or something. Josh Hart was locked in on him, and he wasn't really playing off of him any more than you would normally play off of Jimmy Butler if he was standing in the corner, spacing out for three. Like, Jimmy Butler basically transformed into PJ Tucker for 4 minutes. Like, that's how he was being used on offense. And so that was strange. And then not really attacking him until later. They only got to it one time where RJ Barrett was like, oh, okay. RJ Barrett, who had a rough game for the Knicks, they finally called something out where they wanted to attack that mismatch, drag Jimmy's guy into a screen, and then go ahead and attack that matchup. And credit to Kyle Lowry, he kicked Jimmy Butler out of the switch, and he just stripped RJ Barrett and just like kind of neutered that entire possession for the Knicks. So he really did step up, and the Heat in general stepped up. I mean, after he goes down, it was still sort of a game that was in the balance there at that point.
97-92 when he gets injured. Yeah. And I'm sorry, 95-92. So they were only up 3. He gets injured. Yeah. Hits the 2 free throws. Brunson immediately hits a shot after that. And so back to being a 3-point game.
Gabe Vincent hits a 3-pointer.
Yeah.
Bam hits a big hook shot.
Run, so
and then Lowry hits a fadeaway jumper. So that was the thing. Like, as soon as Jimmy basically turned himself into a PJ Tucker on offense, I tweeted this. The offense belongs to Kyle Lowry, Gabe Vincent, and Bam Adebayo. And all 3 of those guys hit shots on 3 consecutive possessions and basically put the game away for the Heat. Let's get to some of these listener questions here. Brady G writes in using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Up 1-0 in the series. Should Spo be strict on the minutes that Jimmy and Kyle Lowry play in game 2? I'm not really sure the Kyle Lowry minutes there. And
he did bang his knee at one point, and he kind of was cursing. I think he got fouled late in the. I can't recall exactly at what position it was, but it was late in the game. Miami had a sizable lead, and they were really being challenged at that point. He took free throws, hit 1 of 2, if I'm not mistaken. He stayed in the game, so
played 30 minutes. You don't know, game, so I don't anticipate. And if Jimmy has to be a little bit strict on minutes, he played 43 minutes in this one. 43 and a half. I don't imagine that you're going to start cutting minutes from other people too. And they're usually limiting Kyle Lowry to upwards of 30 minutes anyway. So that's about it. So in terms of Jimmy Butler, I think that you just need to, I don't know that you go into that being strict. Obviously, we'll get updates on that ankle going forward, and the medical staff will obviously have a better idea of what Jimmy is able and not able to do. But it is just something you're going to have to monitor this entire series, no matter what, because that's also something that kind of get re-aggravated, could bother you, etc.
Do an MRI, right? At the very least, he'll do an MRI. He'll probably be listed as questionable. I'm going to go out and I would say probably questionable for now, not doubtful. I don't know how severe it is, but that's
and then from the coaching staff, anytime Spo is asked about it, he'll say something like day to day, right?
Yeah, he's done work. He got some work in, and he's maybe with our training staff, etc. So we won't find out till probably 20 minutes before tip off on Tuesday,
unless he's just ruled out completely after an MRI, which is also possible. Because if he's out, they can't rule him as questionable, because then they'll get fined again, and they don't want to do that. Right. Brian writes in, after Jimmy shot the free throws, why not put in Max Strus or Kevin Love for the closing minutes? It's a good question. I think it was a fair question to ask. A lot of these things with the ankle, you almost just want to play on it, right? You kind of
and again, remember, it was a 3-point game at that point. You can't really afford to have your best player out during that stretch. That Gabe was able to hit that big shot, that Bam, Kyle, etc.
Yeah, I would agree with you, but also you didn't really know if you asked Jimmy, "Hey, how are you feeling? Are you gonna be able to play?" Right. And then and then Jimmy Butler says, "Of course." And then you watch him limping down the court, barely in the game, and then at that point, maybe you're like, probably can't be playing in this game, and then maybe you put in Max Strus or Kevin Love or somebody else. But like you said, they hit those 3 consecutive baskets. They were able to extend the lead. And if you're Jimmy Butler, again with these ankles, the last thing you kind of want to do is just sit on the bench and let it swell up. You tighten up the shoestrings and you stay out there. You don't want all the blood rushing to it. My dad texted me, Jimmy Butler's going to sleep with that sneaker on. So
probably taped up at the very least. Maybe not the sneaker. That would probably be a little uncomfortable. I see him being a little too OCD for all that. But, I think it kind of worked too. And if anything, it kind of is the underlying theme to what I had mentioned before, in the sense that the Knicks, for all that they've been able to accomplish this season, and look, this is no disparaging of them. They're a very, very good team, obviously. I think they also showed a little bit of a lack of poise and a little bit of lack of understanding about the moment. The decoying of Jimmy Butler kind of threw him off, because so much of what Jimmy had been able to accomplish changed it dictated the game plan for the New York Knicks, particularly defensively. And so while he's out there, I guess the recognition is that, well, he's still a potential threat, and you can't just sag off.
And what is it that Dwayne Wade once said, like the recovery power of leather, something like that? Or it's just like you put the ball in his hands, and all of a sudden you just turn into the player you were, and you just kind of throw the injury out the window for a couple seconds. Like, so I get it. I think there was a moment too where the mics might have picked up Tom Thibodeau screaming he was going, Josh, like trying to get his attention. Now, who knows what he was trying to say? I imagine it was something like,
get off
of guarding Jimmy Butler, like just put quickly on him or something like that. Like, I don't know. I don't know what it was, because it didn't really seem like Josh Hart reacted to Tom Thibodeau in that moment, but whatever. We'll see, because that they'll probably go into game 2 thinking the same thing that we're thinking. If we don't get any kind of real material update being like, if Jimmy Butler does play, let's monitor how well he's moving. And if he's not moving great, then maybe we can deploy Josh Hart into other, players and things and other matchups and stuff like that. Last question comes from Hasi, who writes in, to whom would we give more minutes to reduce Jimmy's minutes to around 39 or 40, assuming he can play in game 2? Well, I don't know. The answer is probably more Caleb Martin, probably more Max Strus, whoever's got the hot hand. I want to spin this forward and go even in a bigger direction. Given that the Heat are up 1-0 in this series, and how much of a break there is between games 2 and game 3, right? Because it's Tuesday to Saturday. Yeah. Is there something to be said about, well, you already went into MSG, you stole home court. What if you just kind of give them game 2 and just say, you know what, just rest and you're going to get a full week off, basically, if you just if we just rule you out of game 2 completely. And you could do the gamesmanship, we'll see day to day, but like if you're the Heat, you can know that he's not going to play.
Right. I think it's fair. I think ultimately, as well as it should, I think it falls on Jimmy. And I think the training staff will say, look, you're going to aggravate it. It's going to get worse. And then Jimmy's ultimately going to make a decision in conjunction with the staff. But I think that's the biggest factor is whether or not he thinks he can play. I hear you. I would think even with Jimmy out there, to be honest with you, the Knicks will find a way to adjust. It's not a prediction or nothing like that, but it's just the nature of a 2-game series so far. It's just, they're going to figure out what to do. They're going to attack Jimmy more the way they could it today. Somebody's going to get a little bit more of a hot hand from beyond the arc. Julius Randle could come back. There's a lot of different factors that could swing game 2 in New York's favor. But at the same time, hey, Jimmy might just not want to sit. And if that's the case, he'll play out there. You hope for the best. You hope it doesn't re-aggravate the injury. And then take that time off in between games 2 and 3 to get back to as close to 100%. I think that's the other thing too, and we hear it all the time, somewhat cliched perhaps, but at this point in the season, no player's really 100%, and they've been going through whatever nagging injuries will accumulate over the course of a long-ass season. Jimmy's played a lot of basketball. He played a lot of basketball, and he still dominated against the Milwaukee Bucks. So we'll see in what kind of shape he is for Tuesday's matchup.
I would be very, very careful in game 2. I would be very, very careful. If there's, I think there would be a good reason to rest him. It depending. Like, look, maybe this whole thing is to do about nothing. But he did say after the game, Cassidy Hubbard from ABC asked him, "How's that rolled ankle feeling?" And he's basically said,
"Feels like a rolled ankle."
Yeah. And so obviously we're gonna know more. But if it's as bad as it looked, or even close to being as bad as it looked, I would really consider, because this is gonna be a long series. I think everybody expects this to be a long series. You need Jimmy Butler to be Jimmy Butler for 4 out of these 7 games, right? Yep. You just need 4 Jimmy Butler games. You don't need 6 of them. You don't need 7 of them. You need 4 of them. So maybe you just write this one off. Understand that the Knicks are the Heat beat the Bucks in 5 games. The Bucks won game 2 after losing game 1 at home, right? Like I think most people are going to expect the Knicks to go ahead and win this one in game 2. We'll see if it actually happens, but I think it would be fair to say, you know what? Let's just make sure Jimmy's as rested as possible, because we expect this to be a long series. We already got game 1.
Could the counter argument be you didn't need a monster game from Jimmy Butler? And yes, he played a lot of minutes and he was still very good and impactful, obviously, but you could probably rely on him even if he's 70, 80% instead of closer to 100, and just hope that Kyle Lowry, et cetera, everybody finds a way to step up, because there were missed opportunities there. Like Duncan Robinson shot poorly. Max.
Sure. I mean, poorly. But I would be really scared that Jimmy re-aggravates it and they try to rush him out there. Like, that would be my fear, is that, and then we saw this in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. He tried to get back out there and he couldn't play. He basically couldn't play 2 full games because he was just trying to fight through it. And you could argue maybe the Heat would have been better off just resting him for one of those full games. I think you made that argument during the conference finals. And I would say, like, yeah, just give him the time off. I don't know. Like, again, we got to see how serious this injury is and the testing and everything like that first. But if it's, like I said, if it's as bad as it looked, I would really consider it if I'm the Miami Heat, because you already got it would be very different if you didn't get game 1 at Madison Square Garden, but you already accomplished the assignment. You had to go in to get the series. You had to go in and steal a game on the road. You did it in the first game. So, look, the Heat also got big contributions from their role players throughout this one, especially after Jimmy Butler got hurt. Credit Cookies is next here on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Everydayers, we're going to be back Monday with a look at game 2 and an update on Jimmy Butler's ankle. As always, you can reach us on Twitter, Instagram. You can email us lockedonheat@gmail.com. Well, it's a Heat win, David, so it's time to get to the kitchen and hand out some credit cookies. What kind of cookies do we have today?
New York Cheesecake cookies, Wes. I think I didn't even know that was a thing, but I looked it up. I was curious.
You looked it up. Okay.
I looked it up. A legitimate recipe out there. New York Cheesecake cookies. I don't know how it works out.
What you think of delicious. Like probably what is a cheesecake made of? Is that sour cream?
No, it's cream cheese. Yeah.
So you probably just have that as like almost like an icing on top of the cookie, probably. I would imagine.
I think it's a little bit more. I think you make like what you would technically call the cheesecake filling, and you probably put the dollop of that somewhere into the cookie so that it bakes on the outside, but still kind of creamy and delicious in the middle. Who cares? This isn't about the New York cheesecake. It's an overrated dish anyway. Nobody cares. The point is, Miami goes, hey, cheesecake is delicious. It's fine. New York cheesecake, whatever.
I think when I think about New York, I think about the black and white cookie, by the way.
Can I segue? Yeah, I know, like Jerry Seinfeld. Can I segue into, what I wanted to rant about? I am so sick, just like you hate, what is it, the Raptors Village or whatever, Jurassic Park, where everybody look at our crowd. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Can we stop with the panning to whatever celebrities are there? They live in New York City because New York City is a fantastic city. Not to go watch the goddamn Knicks. Nobody cares about that. When they had nobody on that team and they weren't winning anything, you still saw celebrities there. Woody Allen, whatever. Ben Stiller, he's been there for a lifetime. Jon Stewart, everybody was there. Why? Because
I haven't seen Woody Allen there in a while. I wonder why that is.
Well, I don't think he goes out in public much for good reason. So I think that might be a little contentious there, Wes. I don't. It's hard to appreciate the game, whether the Knicks are winning or not. You're not going to get a lot of appreciation.
I'm with you on the constant panning to the celebrities. I don't mind it. Same thing happens at Staples or whatever, crypto now.
Yeah, whatever.
I like to see a celebrity every once in a while. It's kind of cool. I get it, but like I also don't need to see Ben Stiller 7 times. Just show me like once. I'm like, oh, Rock. Cool. Ben Stiller's there. Awesome. Yeah, Chris Rock was on the screen like 15 times. There was a possession. Jimmy Butler missed a layup, and I had no idea what happened because Spike Lee was on my just my entire TV, which is Spike Lee's face. And you can hear the dribbling and the squeaking of the sneakers. And I'm like, I think there's basketball happening. But I wouldn't know because it's just Spike Lee's face that I'm looking at right now. And like, how many times do I have to see Spike Lee on my TV screen, let alone in the middle of live action? It's ridiculous. So I'm with you on that. He's
been there. We know he's going to be there. But we know.
There's a limit. Yeah, there's a limit.
I hear you. It's very bizarre.
Very bizarre. So no credit cookies to the broadcast, I suppose.
Exactly.
We already mentioned Kyle Lowry. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that. I think we were pretty thorough, but how many cookies out of the 10?
I think he probably gets 3. Big shots, great defense. I don't think it's going to be pointed out. I mean, you can look to the turnovers he faced because I don't even think they qualify as steals, but just a number of slap downs that he had from Brunson, Mitchell, Robinson, excuse me. Just the fact that he was just being able to time it just right. So he would just knock the ball out against an opposing player, forcing a turnover that way, and just completely discombobulated what the Knicks were looking to do. Very, very effective game plan from him.
I mentioned
really solid game.
The strip on RJ Barrett at the end there was huge. I mean, that was kind of maybe not a swing moment in the game, but in a very impactful late. Demoralizing is good. Kind of shut the door almost like a nail in the coffin, like a dagger swat almost. We got to talk about Kevin Love and the fact that he was the best passer in Madison Square Garden tonight. One of the other celebrities that they showed a million times was Aaron Rodgers, who's newly a New York Jet, which means you're dead to me, Aaron Rodgers. I used to like Aaron Rodgers when he was the Packers. Not anymore. That's over. Kevin Love had 4 assists in the game. 3 of them happened in about 60 seconds and back-to-back outlet passes in the third quarter. He was tremendous. You look at that stat line, it was 9 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. It doesn't really stand out, but I thought he was really important. I thought the Heat did a really good job boxing out in this game, and Kevin Love was a big part of that. He played 16 minutes, and plus minus isn't exactly what you want. Like PER, you remember the PER stat? Like almost like your productivity per minute. I would venture to say he probably had like the highest PER of any team. It just felt of any player on the Heat. It just felt that way. Like you really felt his minute out there.
He was really, really good. His shot making, the passing, the rebounding, the boxing out, he was a factor. And it's, again, a good point that it doesn't have to necessarily be over a large amount of minutes played or anything like that. But this is what he's there for. Like, he's just there to provide a big body, skill from the perimeter, skill as a passer, very, very effective. And you can't discount either, as we did, as we pointed out in the Bucks, just the veteran leadership, the championship experience that he's had to be able to recognize what's going on, make adjustments, and he stepped up. Like, the shot is fluid. Look, we criticized him when it was necessary to do so. He struggled many times in the Heat uniform when he was first part of the team, even though the rebounding was a nice addition, everything else like that just didn't seem to work out, especially when the shot wasn't falling. But they've just figured out how many minutes he should get and how he's figured out, I think, we can't overlook that either, how to be impactful in those minutes. And the rebounding,
and he's been more than just when they first got him, it kind of felt like he was just floating along the arc, kind of waiting for shots to come. And now he's sort of figured out his spots in the offense too. He's 2 of 5 from 3-point range tonight. He knows what he's doing. Like in game 5 against the Bucks, he's like running pick and roll with Bam. Like, he's like doing stuff now on offense, which is really good. So I think 2 cookies to him is fair. Gabe Vincent, I think, was huge. 6 of 16 shooting, 20 points, 5 assists. And the stat that really jumps out to me is the 12 shots from 3-point range. And he kind of felt like a little happy. There was like 8 of them. I think of the 8 of those threes were in the first quarter. But I think the Heat need that. I think Gabe's shot attempts in this series without Tyler Herro is going to be as big as anything else. They need somebody else to be aggressive, especially with Kyle Lowry coming off the bench and Jimmy Butler probably trying to kind of pick his spots a little bit more and get other guys involved, because I think they're going to need that in this series to beat the Knicks. Gabe Vincent was huge.
Yeah, you'd want a couple of those to fall probably at a higher rate, but I agree with you. No, I still think the aggression though is important. At one point there, like he hit connected on a couple in the fourth quarter, but earlier there was that middle stretch there where the shot just wasn't falling, and whatever. It's still happens. He needs to be established as a threat so that the Knicks defense can center on him, take him seriously. Otherwise, they'll just double down on somebody else and sag off of Vincent. But him going off early, and it was a lot of that same recipe that we saw from Gabe in Game 5, where he was just attacking. He was their most aggressive player in that first quarter, at least from an offensive perspective, taking a lot of shots, probably again a little bit more than maybe he should. But it seemed to throw off what Milwaukee's defenders were going to do, because all of a sudden you have to take him seriously as a threat. And when he does get those opportunities, he was capitalizing more often than not. Really, really good game from him.
Highest plus minus on the team. I was going to go 3 to him. I feel like he deserves more than Lowry. So maybe drop.
Come on. Okay. I mean, look, I don't really. I hate saying it that way, but I think Lowry's defense was a little bit better.
Fair enough. All right, so 2 to Vincent. I'm not going to argue with you about it. I don't feel that strongly. You do.
7. That's 7 in total. Anybody else?
So
Jimmy gets
2 to Jimmy, and then 1 to Bam. I thought Bam was really good. 16 points, 7 to 12 shooting. It wasn't that bad. Shooting from him, 7 rebounds, a couple of assists. Like, I think there's a better game to be played for Bam Adebayo, which is why he's only getting 1 cookie. But he was important in this game, and defensively, he was all over the place. He was neutralizing
block shots.
A lot of block. He had the block shots. He actually didn't get credited for any block shots, so maybe they went down as, I don't know. It just felt like he was deterring stuff at the basket. He did get 1 goaltend called on him late in the game, but when Spo said like, "Hey, we need to lock up defensively and kind of get guys out of the paint," that was Bam playing up closer to the point of attack. Kind of vaporizing those driving lanes. Like it was all that subtle stuff that kind of goes unseen with Bam, but he was providing it. Defensively, he's had an amazing playoffs. And I know people are going to focus on the shooting and the lack of scoring that he's done basically after the first 2 games against the Milwaukee Bucks. But defensively, he's been as reliable and as great as he's ever been.
I think, look, you're going to look at Mitchell Robinson scoring at the rim and say that's mostly on Bam, et cetera. But I think part of that, and maybe you might think differently, I think a lot of it was by design, like to pressure either Hart quickly or especially Brunson as a ball handler, kind of forcing them and seeing if maybe you can force a turnover that way. And if they eventually find a way to squirm out of that double team, and then they can find an open man and Robinson at the rim, I think you'll live with that, because that's a much lower percentage shot.
It's not like in terms of like Mitchell Robinson only had 7 points, 14 rebounds. He only, quote unquote, only had 5 offensive rebounds after having what was like 14 against the Cavaliers in the last 2 games of that series. Like, so I mean, in terms of if you get that from Mitchell Robinson every game, you're pretty happy if they're Miami Heat.
Yeah,
because he could do a lot more damage. Yeah, I mean, he looked like Will Chamberlain out there against the Cavs. So I mean, he was amazing. So yeah, I have no problem with it.
Yep. Shout out to Spo. I think continues to juggle the rotation really well. Gets everybody. I like that the audio that we got from that first time out of the game, because it shows how intense he is, how well he understands. You know that, and I like the credit that he's been getting on social media. A lot of people, national media, even fans, just saying, you know what, Spo's the best coach still available in the playoffs, and I think why we saw why in tonight's game.
We'll have more of an update on Jimmy Butler tomorrow. We're going to look ahead to what the Heat can do differently and what they can expect the Knicks to do differently in Game 2 on Monday morning. But for now, thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. David, thanks for joining me.
Shout out Tracy Morgan for always being there in Madison Square Garden.
Was he there?
No, probably. Who cares?
Who else did you see? I saw Stiller, Chris Rock. Didn't see John Stewart. He's usually there.
Yeah.